welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ellie, and today's video I'm going to be talking about all of the books and the series that got me into reading. I have always been a reader ever since I could read, but there are some series that stand out from when I was a child and a teenager that I think definitely solidified my love for reading. So I just thought I would talk about those series today, and I'd be really interested to find out what books were the ones that got you into reading. So the first series I'm not going to talk too much about because I think absolutely everyone has probably heard, read or seen the movie adaptations of the series, but of course that is Harry Potter. You can probably tell by the condition of my copy of the Philosopher's Stone just how long ago I got these books, but also how many times they have been read. I remember seeing the very first Harry Potter movies in the cinema and absolutely loving them, and then throughout my childhood reading the books, and I still go back now. Every year I do a little Harry Potter readathon and reread all of the books, so I can probably recite these from memory by now, but I think these are a staple for a lot of people's childhoods, and are also the series that got a lot of people into reading in their younger years. Even as adults, I see people reading it for the first time and really enjoying it, but I couldn't do this video without mentioning the Harry Potter books. Then I have Girl Missing by Sophie Mackenzie. I specifically remember being gifted this book for like my 10th or my 11th birthday, which might have been a bit too young considering the contents of this book. I did quite often read above my age, and I remember absolutely devouring this book. There are 2 other books in the series which I also own, and again you can tell how many times this book has been read by the condition of it. In this book we follow 15-year-old Lauren coming to the end of the school holidays, and she has to complete this project called Who Am I, where essentially she has to write down and put together a presentation of all the things that make her her family and where she comes from. But Lauren was adopted as a child, and the task just gets her thinking about where she really did come from, and she's really happy in her family life. Both of her parents really love her, and she has a younger brother who she isn't so fond of. But out of curiosity, at the very start of the book she types her name into a Google search and she comes across a missing persons website. She was just scrolling through, as I said, she was just really curious, until she comes across a photo of a girl who had some similarities to her and also had a very similar name and a very similar birthday, and her mind begins racing and she starts thinking, what if this could be me? However, Lauren is from the UK, this is set in the UK at the start, and this missing child is from America. She starts to try and push the thoughts out of her head because there's no way this girl could be her. Her best friend Jam comes over and can tell that she's acting slightly weird, and she confesses what she has found to her. He kind of laughs about it, says there's no way that it could be her, but Lauren cannot get the thought of this out of her mind and this missing little girl. Then she goes up into the attic to try and find some old photos of herself to put into this project when she comes across her mum's old journals. Flicks through them, seeing if it would give her any insight as to what she was like as a child, when she makes a discovery that maybe her adoption wasn't as straightforward as she thought. And with what she had found online about this missing child, she devises a plan, and also included within these journals was the address of the adoption agency, which just so happened to be in America. So Lauren convinces her family to take a vacation to America, to a theme park which is located near this adoption agency, and her plan is when her family are at the theme park, she's going to somehow sneak off to this adoption agency and try and find out what is really going on, if she can find out anything else about her adoption. Her father is then unable to go on holiday, so her best friend Jam takes his place, and they devise this plan of how they are going to get to the adoption agency. All of this does happen right at the very start of the book, so I feel like this is a lot of information, but it's not really giving away too much as to what happens. But essentially Jam and Lauren reach the adoption agency, and there is someone waiting for them who knows a lot more about her adoption and will do anything to keep her quiet. And it's a real test of Lauren and Jam's friendship, but it also leads to a little bit of romance between the two as well, where they are on the run across America together. As I said, there are 3 books in this series. The second book is a bit more of a continuation of Lauren and Jam's story, and then the third book is told from one of Lauren's family members. So it is YA, but it is really, really gripping. So if you have never picked up this series, you definitely should. The next series that had me absolutely gripped as a teenager is the House of Night series by PC and Kristen Cast, the first book in the series being marked. I don't know if you can see on my shelf down there, but I have quite a lot of the books. There are so many in this series, and I think I've honestly probably read them out of order because I used to take them out from my local library and would just read whichever one they had in at that given time. So I'm slowly now collecting this series so that I can go through and read them all in order. In this we follow Zoe, where she attends the House of Night, which is a school for vampires. I was never a fan of Twilight as a teenager, or now really, so this was the vampire series that I grew up loving. Zoe makes a really sweet friend in Stevie Ray, but there are also some mean girls. She falls in love with another vampire called Eric, and Zoe is really, really powerful, and that power only grows throughout the books. I can't really remember too much as to what happens in these now. As I said, I've read them completely out of order, so it's all a bit of a blur in my mind, but I'm definitely going to go back and reread these in order. But when I've watched other people do this video, I have seen this series come up quite a lot, so I think a lot of people read this growing up. But I always loved the characters in this, I loved the setting in this, and I was always really gripped by it. And then I was also absolutely hooked on this series, Evermore by Alison Knoll. I believe there are 5 books in this series. I do own all 5, but again, I used to read them from my local library, so they were read out of order when I can find them, but now I own all 5. I am planning on doing another read through of them all. In this one, we follow 16-year-old Eva. At the start of the book, her family are involved in a car accident and she is the only survivor, so she is sent to live with her auntie. Eva is shy and keeps to herself because after this car accident she had this newfound ability that she could see people's auras, and she didn't want people to think she was crazy, so she never spoke about it to anyone, and it was just something she lived with until she starts this new school. She makes some new friends, and there is this guy called Damon who shows up, and all is not as it seems with him, and it turns out that maybe Damon and Eva have a bit of a past together that she just cannot remember. This past is explored more throughout the series. It does kind of remind me of the whole Vampire Diaries series now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I absolutely loved this series. I want to do a read through again soon. The covers of these are really pretty as well, but I feel like most of the books that I read growing up were very mild fantasy, paranormal, and I do still really love to read those genres now. Some other books which I don't have now but I do also remember loving when I was a child was like the Rainbow Fairy series. I remember always hunting for my local libraries to find a book with the fairy with my name on, and I could never ever find them. It was another series I read growing up. If I can find it, I will insert a picture, but again, that was about fairies. I read a lot of fantasy, I guess, back then with vampires and fairies and magical worlds. It was only when I got older I started to read a lot more romance, but I think I definitely still stick to having fantasy and paranormal as my favourite kind of genres. I just think it's really interesting to look back at the books that got you into reading and books you enjoyed when you were younger to compare against what you read now to see if your tastes have changed very much, and I honestly don't think mine really have. But yeah, if you read any of these books and any of these series, then please let me know what you thought of them, whether you loved them or whether you didn't really like them, or if you know of any books or series that have similar vibes to the ones I've mentioned that are adult romances or adult fantasy series that just are similar, because I think that'd be really interesting to read about as well. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again next week.